Apamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. Your support really does make a huge difference. You'll find a link for contributions on the website at apamada.org/contribute. Thank you so much. Hi.
Hi. So we're already at our time. So I don't know if possibly some other folks will join us as we do. I wanted to find out if you have any leftover questions from last week, from the class last week, or reflections. Sheila, did you have something?
Hi, everybody. I think I emailed you, Peg. Did you get my question about maybe I didn't send it? Anyway.
I'm not remembering getting a question, but it could be that it's there.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll ask it here. Basically, I keep hearing the term, the phrase, cleansing your karma.
You mentioned that, and I thought it'd be a good thing for us to talk about it.
Yeah, so I'd just like to hear more about if that's even possible or if it's something the Buddha talked about.
No, it didn't.
It sounds like sort of a modern concept.
I think it's a modern concept. You know, there's some sage, you light it and you wave it around and your karma's cleansed or something. I don't know. No, the things that you've done, the actions that you take have repercussions you can't undo, right? How many times have you thought, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or, you know, I wish we could go back in time and that hadn't happened. So you can see it's not, it's the ripples that flow out from the actions and thoughts and speech that we make, right? So yes, that can't be cleansed. However, you can set the causes and conditions for your karma going forward to be positive karma, right? So that's your opportunity. That's why the action is always in the present tense. What's happened in the past, the repercussions of it continue. And most of us have things in our past that we feel the repercussions of even today, right? Actions that we took, things that we said, you know, things that we didn't do, things that we failed to do. So that can't be undone.
Right. I think more the context that I have heard it in that made the most sense to me, I guess, was it's more of a when your karma ripens, so to speak, when the conditions are set for
the fruition of it,
your deeds to ripen,
yeah.
That your response at that point, if you realize that is sort of something that is ripening, that sort of action, then the more skillful response at that time will cleanse the past, what's happened in the past, there's another word that's used sometimes too besides cleanse. Maybe it is just that karma sort of ripens and then dissipates, or what, the reaction down the road. It's how you respond down the road that then makes it not recur in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't. That karma ripens, the fruit of it ripens, and it comes to fruition, and that's it. What you do creates causes and conditions for additional karma.
Next, okay.
Yeah. So it's like, in a way, it's like cleansing an apple tree that's, come to the point of bearing fruit. What does that even mean? Right?
Right. Right.
It's a naturally occurring causes and conditions. And that's why your only opportunity to act is in the present moment. And in the present moment, you're inevitably creating karma through the thoughts, words, and deeds, with one exception, according to at least the Zen teachers, which is when you're sitting in zazen, you're not creating any karma.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, and I think that depends, if you're having thoughts, you're creating karma, right?
Yeah.
So if you're sitting in that spacious, boundless awareness, you're not creating any thoughts, or at least not attaching to any thoughts. You're not, you have no volition, right? So it's about volition. Karma is all about volition. It's all about action.
Yeah.
So, so the caution is these things cast a long shadow. So maybe through many lifetimes. So it's wise to engage in wholesome actions and wholesome thoughts and wholesome speech, because you're setting up conditions that could propagate, through many lifetimes. And the only thing that's assured is that those karmic fruits will ripen. And so evildoers will eventually suffer the effects of the evil they've created, even though it might not happen in this lifetime. So that's the sense I have of it anyway, according to the early Buddhist teachings, not, I know that there are contemporary teachers who make their own interpretations, but it's not supported in the text anyway.
Yeah. That sounds sort of like an idea that might have started in California.
Perhaps. Yeah. It's like, can you cleanse an avocado? I don't know, like it's there. Lisa, you got a question?
Oh, you're muted, Lisa. Hang on.
We're just reviewing questions that people have from previous classes right now. So don't worry if you came in a little bit late.
Oh, okay, because I was fiddling with stuff. So I had a question. I wanted to say, I took photos of your mind map and all the notes. So, it's like pretty awesome. I had been rereading them, and my mind was actually far more blown on the second or third reading. It's like, it just it's just a process, right?
Yeah.
So what really caught my attention were the words, it's what one thinks relates to an underlying tendency in the mind that in turn forms the object for the establishing of consciousness. I think that makes sense to me, except I'm not really positive I understand. In early Buddhist thought, the underlying tendencies are latent dispositions in the mind. And I think that he's kind of relating it to like a previous, like residue maybe of a previous life.
Could be previous activity.
Previous activity. Oh, okay.
So your previous activity and experience can establish tendencies. So, you watch a horror movie and then you watch another horror movie and then you sort of get hooked on horror movies. And then that forms the furnishings of your consciousness, right? Those images, sounds, right?
Yeah, so it's not an underlying tendency you were born with. I guess
some of them you are born with.
I thought there was a reference to that somewhere in here.
And some of them you lay down in your experience and activity in this life. But, even now psychologists are pretty aware that there's at least 5 traits that people come in with. And So do they tend to be more observant, or do they tend to be more active? Do they tend, so when faced with a new experience, do they tend to be engaged and curious, or do they tend to be fearful and withdrawn? So, even tiny infants come in with these tendencies. So those are the ones that at least that they've been able to identify looking in their studies of infants.
Okay, and that, I mean, that wasn't necessary. I understand it in present life. It's like some of it is in terms of conditioning that begins, immediately after, during birth, probably, or maybe in the womb. Anyhow, he's not necessarily trying to relate it as something brought in from.
Not necessarily, because you are going to be in an environment which conditions you in certain ways. You're going to be responded to that conditions you in certain ways, and that too establishes tendencies.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. So he's saying consciousness is not, at the time of conception, is not seen as a tabula rasa, but rather carries with it in the way early discourses do not further specify imprints from the past life. This type of residual memory, if one may call it such, continues from one life to another.
Right. So you remember one of the analogies the Buddha used was a stamp, like a seal.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes an imprint. But of course, you had to use the other analogies because it's not exact. This is not going to be an exact replica. So that's why he used the other analogies. But that's one of the ways you can think about it, as a kind of imprint on the consciousness.
That is brought in.
Right.
That is carried with the life of the infant.
Right. And this is sort of seems to be supported by some of the studies of children who come in at a very, very young age, know things about a village 200 miles away, can reliably identify things that no longer even exist there. So the kinds of supporting things that happen in the later chapters, he's talking about that. And it's very interesting because you can see they came in with an imprint, right? In some cases, an exact map.
Wow, that is so awesome. I've read about that mostly in like historical fiction type novels having.
There's a lot of scientific study of it. Ian
Mhm.
Stevens is the one who's done the most with children. He's gone all over the world where children exhibit these strange characteristics, like they come in speaking a language that's not their local language. And they have fears of things that that they identify as the cause of their death, right? And then later that some identification is made that, yes, that was exactly right. That was exactly what happened.
Well,
So-
actually, I did not know there were scientific studies that gave
Yeah.
us to this. Okay.
It's scientific in the sense that there's a lot of evidence gathered that is strongly supportive and that is pretty hard to discount. So it's pretty interesting the way they've gone about it to try and disentangle sort of what the families might have, sort of embellished out of what a kid does, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, Chris.
Without even, going into things that esoteric, and I have read some of that and I'd like to read more, but I know from the experience of my two kids, my daughter, my oldest, is sort of a high voltage personality, and was from, I guess a few months in when they really start to show some of their personality, while my son is more of an observer, more quiet and thoughtful, and again, was from the start. And that was the thing that finally convinced me to believe in the existence of a soul or something like it.
Yeah, that they're not coming in as a blank slate in any event. So it's interesting. I mean, Anelio is very, very even-handed. He says, you don't have to believe this. It's not an article of belief. The Buddha didn't claim to believe anything. He only explained what he saw. And it's not necessary to believe anything particular about, but it is an interesting way of expanding our understanding. And the one thing, as I said, that would be non-Buddhist would be a denial of the possibility of rebirth. So that's partly because that's a fixed view and a closed mind. So holding open the possibility would be in alignment with that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, any other lingering pieces from last time? No? Oh, good. Okay. All right. Now, hold on here. So we've had a lot of sort of heady stuff, a lot of information about these early Buddhist teachings, but today we're going to have an exploratory exercise together. So some of you will have done this exercise before, but as we know, these things are different each time we do them. So you're probably all familiar with the Mahayana Buddhist concept of the Bodhisattva. So this is a being with a vow to return lifetime after lifetime to relieve suffering and liberate beings. They have infinite skillful means and can take any form, including an animal, a tree, even a stone, in the service of their vow. So we are now going to use our powerful imaginations to imagine we are such beings standing outside of time, together with our bodhisattva companions. We are awaiting the opportunity to take a human life, a time and a place where we are most needed. We know that once we take a human birth, we will not know each other. We'll have different life trajectories. Yet we do have an affinity for these bodhisattva friends and allies. So we find ourselves gathered together here today in a kind of reunion. A lot has already happened in our lives. It's time to catch up. But first, we have to be ready to take a human birth. So please close your eyes. Imagine yourself standing outside of time and the cosmos, waiting for the right time to enter the world, so in need of care. When you feel ready to take this step into a human life, raise your hand. And Maria, when everyone's hand is raised, we'll be ready for breakout rooms with bodhisattva pairs. The breakout rooms will last 45 minutes. During this time with your bodhisattva partner, you'll be using a kind of framework of questions for catching up with each other's life. Probably it's easiest to take turns with each question. You'll have half an hour for that part of the exercise, and you may not get through all of them. That's okay. Then we'll come back to the main group. You'll have 15 minutes to talk about that experience together, and then we'll come back to the main group. You do not have to reveal anything you do not wish to, or something that would be painful or traumatic to recall. This is just a catching up with a good friend. So I'm going to broadcast a screenshot of the questions, and you can use the vertical slider to make the screenshot larger or smaller as you wish. I'm hoping this is big enough for people to see. And also, the notion of having one's life conditions may be problematic for some people. This is the note, the caution. The idea of taking responsibility for situations that have oppressed them can smack up blaming the victim, or not using the verb choose in its ordinary sense, as in choosing a car or a job, but in the larger or even metaphysical sense in which we let ourselves accept and see the value of all that has befallen us. Okay. All right, let's see what we can do here. you're back. What was that like?
I found the exercise very uplifting. I enjoyed it, not only hearing two other wonderful people's stories, but being able to tell a little bit of my own. And it always is just a gift when there's somebody there who will listen to you and listen so well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Lisa, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I got with Donna again. First I was with Medea, but then I got to be with Donna, and we worked together last time, and it was really pretty exciting. And part of what made it exciting was, so we chose different approaches to this, and Donna used her real life to answer all these questions. And that was fascinating because so much of it resonated with me to the point, like I was really moved. It's like, wow, you're playing, you know, this is how you experienced yourself, you know, at this time, which is not too far off when I was born. And then, because I had a different interpretation of, okay, I'm going to choose to be a certain way. And I decided to stick with it instead of just choosing myself and for my real self and my current incarnation. And I thought, how can I possibly do this? But I just decided to go with it, and I had a great deal of fun, and it was very, very revealing. Donna's smiling because I just immediately had a vision of an octopus and with lots of arms. And so I chose to be an octopus 500 years in the future. I need a lot of light, so I couldn't be too far down. Then I talked about how wonderful to have all these arms. And
Oh, you actually engaged a fantasy.
I did. I know maybe that was cheating, but it really brought out a lot. Well, I decided to go with it, even though I thought, well, it's not productive in the same way. It's not beneficial in the same way. That I learned so much about my aspirations and longings. What do you think, Donna? I mean, it's like, oh, it was a fantasy, but it's all of my not so hidden longings.
Yeah.
I thought it was wonderful. You know, for me, total failure of imagination, you know, right at the beginning, choice, we've got a choice. But, so I thought, well, you know, I don't have time to work this through, so I'll just go with my real life. But Lisa, I was just so impressed. And you know, you really, I think you're so right that it gave you an opportunity to really explore aspiration in a wonderful way. I was just blown away at your imaginative creation there, and it seemed like a very wise and wonderful one to me.
Thank you for sticking with me, Donna.
You can't help but reveal much of yourself, even if you're constructing something. Oh, Leslie.
So there was a little bit of anxiety at the very beginning because Mady and I didn't know whether we were supposed to use our own life or make up one. And so we both just decided to use our own life. And anyway, it just was fascinating to hear the story. And I want to reiterate what Sheila was saying as well, is that having people listening and having the questions were a really good guide to just, I was amazed how we just went through like the entire life from birth to where we are now with those. So it was a thoroughly enlightening experience.
It gives you, I think, a little bit of a different perspective on some of the things that you've been through, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, Sandra?
I was in the beginning, I didn't start when you start with the exercise. So Chris was very kind to do with me. So I was able to get in that. But it was really very rich working with Chris and see how I noticed that we can get some things from our life and start creating something similar in the future. And sometimes for me it was a little more probably idealistic. I was creating something very happy and lovely and peaceful and harmonious and all that. And when you ask the last question, you just bring me back. Last question, say, oh yes, so impermanence, and yes, this can happen, suffering and all that. But it was okay. In that it was okay. That's part of the life. And that was very, very uplifting, that to be able to really, for me to see that I can go and do my body stuff about live this life through this part instead through the conditions. The conditions still in there, but instead if I caught them and can choose, say, oh, this is my mission. What is my mission? What is my mission to bring? My idealistic world that I started is basically that mission, that love and happiness in this world, even though it's suffering.
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you for the exercise. It was very rich with your questions.
Ellen? There we go.
So anyway, it was really hard, I thought, to project what would be the best. I mean, there were things to think about, like, well, I'd love to have this really ideal life, but maybe that wouldn't be the best for really being a good bodhisattva. And so there were all kinds of decisions to make. And it seemed like it was a lot like that for the others. It wasn't always easy to decide. And then it made me think about, so if this was true, and at some point, I had decided on all of these current circumstances, how in the world did I choose certain things? Why would I do that? And trying to think, maybe I need to let that influence what I might do. Something like that. It was interesting, and it was hard.
Yeah, I think it's hard sometimes to view the challenges that we've faced as growth producing rather than big catastrophes.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to wish catastrophes on your future.
Well,
Well, it's hard. It was puzzling. Like, what kind of parents would I want? How kind would I want them to be? And how, it was just like to find.
I think it's puzzling to invent something. Think about your current life in that way. That's the challenge, I think, to think. So I was born in this time. The historical era was, in my case, post-war, right? So people had a big sense of prosperity in the end of war, the end of the Depression. There was a very buoyant feeling. And so I'm thinking about those conditions I stepped into, and yet I stepped into a family that was quite unhappy. And so it's like viewing that, instead of viewing that as the great calamity of your childhood, but to view it as what that brought to me in the way of training, or in the way of understanding, or in the way of compassion, was what I took from it, right? What certain amount of resilience, a certain amount of sort of self-esteem. So I think it's very hard to invent something. I do think that's really hard. Yeah, very difficult. So Janie.
Yeah, I was in Ellen's group and I was just going to we kind of got stuck in that issue of what kind of parents would you choose? And we were comparing it. Maria also didn't have the happiest of families. And like my sister turned out entirely different than me. And I did become like a seeker and more compassionate and empathic, but it also caused trouble going out in the world and doing anything. And so I kind of got stuck there, like, what kind of parents, would you want to have? I said, I'd love to have wise parents who guided me wisely and kindly and to be heard and all of that. Which would be better for being able to have an impact, go out in the world and be a positive influence, having problems with your family or having wise, guiding adult figures. So we're all talking about that a lot.
Yeah, but it's really about, you got what you got and you made something out of that. You grew through it. And it had, no matter how difficult, it had some gifts for you, even in teaching you to be your own person, that you weren't going to be like that, or you were going to be your own independent-minded person. So there's a lot of ways in which we look at the issues of our past as somehow burdening our present, rather than serving as a kind of formation of the present, or shaping of the present in ways that allow us to do what we do, so that we're not destroyed by it. So there's a certain inner strength that you have because that can't beat me. And so that's the part of it is, it also goes into the future in the sense that the way you view adversity can be, oh no, now I'm defeated. Or you can say, this is a certain kind of training. What is the training? What is the bodhisattva training that I'm encountering? Okay, Maria.
Yeah, it's been something you've just said. Some of the stuff I was going to say, Peg, in that I think what this exercise made me realise is that the more I looked into it, the more I wouldn't choose anything else. Because I really feel like from where I came from in my early days, and both my parents, who were both emotionally unavailable, and in so many ways, and I think I can remember from a very early age, all my life, kind of seeking and searching for something that was outside of everything where I was at, just searching for some kind of peace. And I think what gave me that drive was everything that came before, the foster homes, the different situations I went through. Would I be where I am now without all of those different things? And would I have the empathy and compassion that I have for others now, or the understanding to work with alcoholics, to work with people that have deep emotional issues? I mean, would I have that container? I think it was almost like all this training that grew my container to be available to people that are really struggling, and to all the family. Like all the trainings I've done in my life were to turn back around and help them, and in turn help me, and in turn helped others. So and it made me keep seeking until I came upon this practice, which has been the biggest, largest thing that's changed everything and turned everything around for me. The awareness it gives you, the capacity, it increases that container. And would I have arrived here without all of that? Would I have had the drive to want to searching for that peace? And then when I do find it, it's like you have to give up your idea of what peace is, and kind of learn to live within it all. And that's what it's helped me to do. It's helped me to learn to live within it all. So this exercise has really kind of helped me to really solidify that I probably wouldn't choose anything else, even though at the time I wanted more available emotional parents, emotionally more available. I wanted you know, to just be stable in one home and not have to be moved around. You know, maybe I wanted to have more confidence, but all of those factors have kept me going from one thing to the next to kind of open me up to the world, to other and myself, inwards and outwards. And it wouldn't have happened, I don't think, without all of that. And yeah, so I don't think I'd choose anything else.
I
As
agree.
hard as it's been.
As hard as it is, and as much as you wouldn't wish it on anybody else, right?
Absolutely not, no.
You know, I often think about this when we hear way seeking mind talks, because almost nobody that I know of comes onto this path from a life of comfort and ease. You know, like it seems like it requires a certain life experience of difficulty and trouble and struggle for people to even recognize that this is something they need.
I mean, why would you look outside of your own self-centered dream if you're perfectly happy within it and content and comfortable? Why would you even bother looking beyond that? What would be the motivation or the even insight to do it?
Right. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. So that's a very good perspective, I think, Maria, to understand, oh, this is what brought me to this place where I could be really working at this level and have the depth of understanding and compassion for people that you have.
And have the opportunity to realize how much I don't know.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And do something with that and to work with that.
Absolutely. And that continues, but that's one of the joys, really. There's always things to learn. There's always
never ending.
But we have to end. So
yeah, we do.
Shall I leave you with a poem? Do you want a poem?
Oh, yes, please.
This is from Marie Howe, and this is one you probably haven't heard. Once or twice or three times I saw. That's the title of the poem. Once or twice or three times I saw something. Once or twice or three times I saw something rise from the dust in the yard, like the soul of the dust, or from the field, the sole body of the field, rise and hover like a veil in the sun, billowing, as if I could see the wind itself. I thought I did it, squinting, but I didn't. As if the edges of things blurred, so what was in bled out, breathed up and mingled, bush and cow and dust and well, breathed a field I walked through waist high, as through high grass or water, my fingers swirling through it, or it through me. I saw it. It was thing and spirit both, the real world, evident and visible. All right. See you next week. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Peg.
Thank you, Peg.
Thank you, everybody.
The Kingdom of Ordinary Time. Marie Howe.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Night from here and good afternoon.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.